Welcome, everyone. This is Pat Bailey, Director of Training at Out and Equal Workplace Advocates, and you have joined the 2014 Virtual Summit Series call. Remember, this is a broadcast audio call, so we're going to be here from 2 to 3:15. Runs a little bit longer, 75 minutes. Make sure you've got your speakers and your headsets on your computers turned up to hear the volume. You can use the chat, which is on the left side of your screen, to chat in questions and respond to polls or make your comments. Please use that. We want to be really interactive today since this is about your brand. If you have some trouble signing in or you drop off, that is the sign-in that you can use. And remember, if you have to leave a little bit early or you miss part of the session or want to share it with the rest of your team, go ahead and know that this session is recorded, and I'll send out an email right after the call with the information about the link for that and the slides. Also, you can make sure to check out the rest of ours up on the website. And for today's call, we're going to be talking about Brand You, bring your fabulous, authentic self to work with some of the experts from Wells Fargo who have joined us. Again, the Summit Series, Virtual Summit Series, is based on the highest rated workshops that we have from the Summit, and it is part of that. So you'll get to hear from this Summit level workshop today. A couple of announcements before we get started. Again, we have our kickoff for the Summit. We're already, even though we haven't finished reviewing 2014 yet, in terms of the virtual Summit, we're going to kick off the Summit next week on Thursday at 12 p.m. Pacific with our kickoff. Come find out about how to put in workshops, the outies, the schedule plans for Dallas, and when we're going to be doing that, October 5th through 8th. We're going to continue our virtual Summit series next month with Clorox. And then we have our monthly town call a little earlier in March because we're going to spend some time here in San Francisco in the Executive Forum, March 24th through 26th. Opportunity, if you have out executives in your workplace who would like to network and come and learn and find out their potential as being LGBT and executives, this is a great opportunity. It's been going on for a number of years, and there's some great learning that goes on. We also have an emerging class that is for folks who may be headed toward that C-suite and moving up in the company that want to also begin to start that networking. The deadline date for those submissions, part of those classes, is coming up, so please contact me or check the website. There's some information there, and we can get you connected. Either nominate someone or nominate yourself. Don't be afraid if nobody thinks about sending you, but you would like to come to it, and you can get that approved through the company. That finishes up with our Momentum Gala on the 26th here in San Francisco. And then we move into April, where we'll be doing some Building Bridges calls, and we are going to have our last and final virtual summit on our April 30th town call, which is Marsh McLellan companies doing their LGBT Global Mobility Survey and the cost of inconsistency. Then, of course, the summit and lots more going on. So please take advantage of the opportunities, and we hope to see you at many of these events. To get started before our call today, I wanted to do a quick poll. And with the poll, you just see the question come up here. Go ahead and answer the question, select your answer, and then hit submit. And that will bring up a display. We'll see how everybody's doing on the call. We have about 70 folks on the call, and responses are coming in. And your choices, are you part of the Employee Business Resource Group or Diversity Council? A lot of different names for this in the companies, but are you involved in that D&I work within your company? And yes, you're in leadership. Yes, you're a member. No, you haven't joined yet. You don't have them in your company. Not applicable or prefer not to answer. And it looks like with about almost 70–80% of our respondents or attendees in, we've got about 60% that are in leadership, and then as a member, 30%, about 4% haven't joined yet, and we've got about 5, almost 6% not applicable, and about 2% prefer not to answer. Great, so good response. Looks like we've got just about everybody in on that. Now, more specifically to the topic today, the next poll question is asking you about, I would rate my personal brand as very clearly defined and strong. So select how your agreement with this statement, from strongly agree to agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree, or not applicable. Your own personal brand. Again, we see responses coming in. Looks like we've got doing pretty well with the agree or 44%. Next is neutral, and that's great. That's why hopefully we'll get some information today on the call, and strongly agree about 13%. And again, we've got almost 85% of the votes in on this one. And forward on that. Excellent. Thanks very much. And again, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to be able to chat in your information. So be sure to use the chat box, and we'll go ahead and have those discussions. But I want to start the presentation now with our first presenter, which is going to be Alan Yabar from Wells Fargo, VP Sales and Marketing Manager. So Alan, all yours.
Thank you, Pat, and good afternoon to all of our participants. Very excited to be with you today to talk about our personal LGBT brands out there. So in terms of just a real quick introduction, I am the Sales and Marketing Manager for Wells Fargo's South Florida region. I've worked for the bank for about 13 years, currently based out of Miami, Florida, and I am the chair of Wells Fargo's Pride, we call them TMN, but I know many of you call them ERG. I've been the Pride chapter head for about 4 years now. So as we get started, I wanted to quickly just test out our chat box and just kind of get a quick sense about participants out there. If you have participated in some sort of brand discussion, brand training, etc., just type in the letter Y on your chat box and broadcast it. If you haven't, type in the letter no, just so that we can get a sense of how many of you out there have participated in a similar presentation before. Oh, I see 2 Y's already and quite a few N's. So it looks like some of this information may be a little bit of a refresher for many of you that have already participated. Maybe you'll get some extra new tips and things. And for many of you that have never participated in this, ideally this presentation will really kind of introduce this concept to you, create some awareness, and really begin that dialogue around your personal LGBT brand. So as we're thinking about brands, the first thing that comes to mind are some of those real famous, really popular brands out there, brands like Apple and their innovation, brands like maybe Starbucks and their coffee, PepsiCo and the many great products that they have, etc. But very seldom do we think of our own professional brand. So Brand You is really going to be a discussion around what that is. What is the LGBTA professional brand? It's also going to be a discussion around how to leverage your LGBTA brand as a competitive advantage for career growth. It's also going to be around really understanding what is your current brand and give you a quick opportunity to start building a brand statement. Earlier in the poll, many of you answered that you felt very comfortable with your current brand, but perhaps you don't have a brand statement out there. So this exercise, so this conversation today will really help you begin thinking about what your brand statement looks like, and you might even walk out of today or hang up this line after the conversation and really walk out with the beginnings of your statement. And then lastly, our conversation is going to focus around maximizing the impact of your brand. So those are the main topics that we're going to be talking about. So in order for us to really have a true understanding of brand and have a conversation around brand, we first have to define it. And I see that the slides keep moving, but we're on slide number 8 right now, which is around defining brand. So for our Wells Fargo Vision and Values document, we have a definition around brand. And the way that as Wells Fargo team members we define brand, we say it is our brand is what people say about us to their friends and family when we're not in the room. It's how they feel about doing business with us and how they describe those feelings. So that's going to be our general definition of brand as we're having this conversation today around our personal LGBT brand. You'll see brand is important in many different aspects of our everyday professional careers. It is also very important, as we know, for companies, and it is very important for us to understand when it is important that we apply and that we focus on communicating our brand and our brand statement properly. We start with interviews. Our brand awareness and how we communicate our professional brand is key when you're having those interviews in the professional workplace. We also want to communicate our brand effectively during meetings, events, and just general interactions. Of course, during presentations, you have to be able to effectively communicate that brand and your professional LGBT brand as you're conducting presentations. Connecting with vendors and coworkers. They need to understand what you're all about, and they understand your brand. And of course, internal and external customers. Now let's type in our chat box, where else out there, participants, you think our LGBTQA brand is important? Let's just type in a couple of different options that aren't listed on this slide. Home, excellent, Esther. That is definitely a great place to communicate your brand. I even think about, for some of you that may have children, it's very important to set that example at home around what your brand as a parent looks like. Potential customers and vendors, excellent. Community events, absolutely. Many of us are interacting with the community quite often, and being able to communicate that brand as we're doing that outreach is excellent. Recruiting, very good. Church, of course. Children and friends. Social media, what a great point. Social media is such an integral part of our lives nowadays that having that awareness around our LGBT brand and our professional brand is key in social media, especially as many of us have our coworkers, maybe some of you may even have your supervisor or manager as a friend on Facebook, etc. You want to ensure that you're translating that professional LGBT brand in your social media interactions. So that's really great. Career discussions in school for graduating students, those are all really great suggestions around translating that LGBT brand outside of just our professional place. Very good. So as we think about brand awareness, we're going to transition to just really think about some LGBTQ personal brands. And to do that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Astrid, to take us through this exercise. Astrid?
Alan, thank you very much. So this is Astrid Rodriguez, and Managing Director at Wells Fargo here in beautiful Miami, Florida. And I've been with the company for the last 18 years after going through 2 different mergers. I would like to hear from some of you, actually read from some of you through the chat room regarding the individuals that you see on the slides. Let me start by sharing at least Tim Cook. We all know he is the CEO of Apple. In 2014, he became the first CEO of a Fortune 500 company to publicly identify himself as gay. This is where I get the most enjoyment out of him coming out. His declaration did not change the perceptions of the investors and customers. So any comments that you would like to share from the other individuals that you see on the slide? We have, for instance, Ellen DeGeneres, well-known comedian, television personality, actress, writer, and TV producer, openly out for quite a few years. Absolutely right. Didn't hurt the bottom line either. And that's precisely what has helped the company a great deal. Yep, George, the use of social media, absolutely. Yes, Apple is a known company that certainly supports the LGBT community. Robin, you're right, Obama. Obama has been extremely helpful to the LGBT community. The president and his administration are dedicated to eliminating barriers to equality, fighting discrimination based on sexual orientation, and certainly gender identity, and absolutely engaging LGBT communities across the country. Yes, Alan, you're right, Laverne. Laverne is an actress, reality television star, producer, and LGBT advocate. Actually, she is the first openly transgender to be nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award. Big deal. Yeah, orange is the new black for sure. So as you can see, we can certainly go on by talking about the different individuals that we have on the slide. That is the reason why we need to share basically some of the things that we've seen in other individuals. We need to learn from them how they have evolved around the LGBT community, whether they are lesbians, openly gay, transgenders, or just allies, as basically Barack Obama. I would like to transfer this over again to Alan, who will continue now with the presentation. Alan, take it away.
Thank you for that great exercise, Astrid, and it's really just great to see how much diversity we have in this page here with all of these different personal brands that we see day to day out in the media, in our TV sets, et cetera, and just really seeing great representation all the way across. I'm going to transition now to the iceberg. And before I get started talking about this iceberg model, I want to just quickly take a quick poll there again and test out our chat box and see if you are familiar with the iceberg model. Type in the letter Y and push send. If you are not familiar with it, or it's been a while since you've heard about it, type in the letter N and push it in through the chat box. Oh, very good. So there's quite a few Y's there and a few N's. Okay, very good. So for those of you that hit Y, this is once again intended to really kind of just refresh your memory. The iceberg model is something that we consistently, that there's a lot of transition day to day. Things sometimes come above the water, some things come below the water, and as we grow as professionals, et cetera, things change in our iceberg model. And for those of you that are not familiar with the model, I'm going to go into just a little bit of a high-level detail of what this concept is all about. So if you look at this iceberg on this slide, just think about the iceberg that we all have and the waterline that we all have. There are some things that we are willing and quickly are able to share with coworkers, family members, friends out in the community, etc. Things about ourselves that we generally keep above the waterline. An example of that could be perhaps your profession, or perhaps particular skills that you've learned. If you're a parent, you're willing to talk about your children and their age and what their interests are, etc. If you're into music, maybe your favorite band. Those are some things that we are just willing to openly talk about and we keep above our waterline wherever we go. And there are some things that we keep below the waterline. Things like maybe religion, things like income, perhaps sexual orientation, things that we don't just generally discuss right away, or that we're selective around who we're sharing, or we potentially measure a little more how much we share about those particular topics. We generally keep those things underwater, or we generally may think twice about who we share them with, depending on your preference or depending on where you are, the setting, etc. So that's what this iceberg model is all about. And it is all about having an awareness about how much we keep above the waterline and how much we keep below the waterline. Because we know that in order to build relationships, in order to establish a brand, we have to have that awareness. Because the more we keep above the waterline or the more we keep below the waterline is when we're opening up to people and letting them understand us, letting them know what we're all about. So I'm going to take just a quick moment to transition to the next slide, and we're going to reflect. We're going to think about what's above and below our waterline, and we're going to type in the chat box and say, maybe what are some things that you are first regularly keeping above your waterline. Let's just type in above our waterline first. And remember, these are things that we're willing to share with anybody. You come into the office and you're willing to talk about it right away. You have no reservations, etc. So great. So life goals. Those are things you regularly talk about. I see who you work for. I see Michael, sexual orientation. That's really great. Raymond, the fact that you're a parent. That's really cool. Ethnicity, kids' activities. Very great. So those are all things that you keep above your waterline. Now, let's think about some things that we're more cautious about or that we keep generally below our waterline. let's type in now some things below the waterline. Weight, very good, Michelle. Religious beliefs, age, my faith, politics. Oh, that's a really good one I didn't think about.
Yeah, Ellen, I saw religion and politics.
Yeah, that's really all great.
How many trips we make to White Castle? I'm digging that one. I keep that secret too.
Very good. So we generally understand the concept of the iceberg, and we generally can understand now how this can be easily applicable as we're thinking about our brand and developing a brand statement. How much of that we're willing to share, and how much of it we're probably more cautious around keeping under the waterline, or being more selective around when we share those things. Vegetarian. Very good. So now I'm going to transition over to June and Astrid and have them talk about career growth.
So as you can see, please feel free to continue using the chat room. I'd like to read from you, what are some of the skills that you feel you bring into the workplace based on your identity and experience as a professional? Obviously, I have read in the past that some people feel that they bring creativity, which is obviously a big deal. Yes, absolutely. Understanding of diversity. Courage, certainly. Strong inclusion value. Okay, problem solving. Acceptance, absolutely. Acceptance of change as well. Tolerance, yeah. Work knowledge, absolutely. Acceptance, certainly. One more time, humor, absolutely. This is something we've heard a great deal in the past. Strength, certainly. Further knowledge, very good, Lynette. Being human makes a lot of sense. So yeah, as you can see, there is a lot of skills that we bring into the community, and especially as a professional. June?
Yeah, I also, I was really struck. Strength, integrity, transparency, authenticity were some of what I heard, empathy. And as we think about as allies, what else might get added to this list? I suspect a lot of them are shared. Sarcasm. I love that popping in. I think that was an answer to our earlier question. But from our experiences as allies, or from our experiences as LGBTQ, what else would we call out? Bridge builder. Ability to bring in heterosexism classes, be a better advocate, a fresh perspective. Interpreter, champion. One of the other leadership qualities or skills that I heard a lot at the summit when we were out in San Francisco was also courage from both groups, from all of our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, queer, ally, all of us, compassion. So as we begin to think about our brands, fearlessness, being able to tell a story, very powerful. Great responses. We begin to think about building our personal brands. Think about these qualities, these skills, these experiences that are the essence of an LGBTQA leader. Resilience, building trust. And capture some words that maybe really resonate for you in terms of how you want your brand to be. It may be how you're living it today. Patience, transcendence. openness. Yeah, I'm sitting in appreciation, really, of so much of what's being shared. Fearlessness, beautiful. Honesty. Thick skin. Skin as thick as a rhinoceros, specifically. Great. A trusted friend. Powerful and fierce. The adjectives and the adverbs are flying. So we're going to begin to shift into building our own brand, and we'll provide some examples. But remember what you're hearing. And I'll share a couple more, and then Astrid, I'll pass this back to you. Open-mindedness, validation, trusted to keep confidences, safety for others, collaboration. Right. So Astrid, I will hand it back to you to get us started really focusing in on our own brands and how we might use some of this to build.
Thank you, June. So as June mentioned just now, keep in mind some of the adjectives that were shared, and I'll give you basically some definitions which I'm sure you heard in the past. So what's personal branding? It's a practice of people marketing themselves and their careers as brands. That's one of the definitions that you can see basically. And at the same time, while previous self-management techniques were about self-improvement, the personal branding concept suggests instead that success comes from self-packaging. And that's obviously very important, taking into account which adjectives you use for yourself, or basically what you feel is your personal branding. Also, another definition, your personal branding statement communicates the essence of who you are in the workplace. And I like this very much. Branding is a marketing concept and tool, because your brand reflects your professional reputation. And if I were to break the concept into pieces, basically it will explain the following. Your specialty, number one, who you are. Number two, your service, what you do. Number three, your audience, who you do it for. And four, but not last, your best characteristic, what you are known for. So as you can see in the slide, basically we have the definition of your value as perceived by others. It reflects what you promise. And even more important, how you deliver on that promise, it shapes others' experiences with you. So if you can help me again, going back to the chat room, how many of you have a current brand statement? And if any of you that answer yes or why would like to share with us, I would love to exchange that information. So team, I remember you said you use it as a chick magnet. Okay, but now you don't have a brand statement. Raymond? No. Lindy? No, not yet. Okay. Well, that is important. That is the reason why we need to go through the different adjectives that we basically heard and be able to build a brand statement. Let me go back and mention basically the four things that I just mentioned. If we are going to break it into manageable pieces, your specialty, again, who you are. Your service, what you do. Your audience, who you do it for. And even more important, your best characteristic, what you are known for. And if you put all the pieces together, you end up with basically what I will say is just of the examples that we can use. So let me move to the next slide. And as you can see, this is a very straightforward branding. I'm an advocate for my customers in helping them achieve their financial goals. I'd like to mention something else that is not there, but something else will be I'm a computer technology manager. I'm biomedical engineer. Well, keeping the machines running smoothly from desktop to the treatment room. These are just very basic examples that we can use. June?
Yeah, so one of the things that I was asked to do, perhaps because I've had a time to practice and hone my own brand statement, and I just wanted to share it with you, is I champion individuals, teams, and organizations to greater success. What was key for me here that others get to define what success is for them, not me, but I can champion and help them get there. And that ties very much to my role as a coach and a consultant, as much as my choice to be an ally and be very active in the social justice space. There were a couple of other brand statements I just want to share that were popped into the chat window. I don't think everybody could see them. One read, passionate educator, focusing on equality for all in the world. A big brand statement. Another that is tied not only to person, but also to their company. And that is, let's go places. So thinking about whether it's a longer example or a shorter example, what speaks to not only who you are, but who you aspire to be. Some of the strongest brands remind us, ourselves, about who we want to be and who we aspire to, what we wish to do every day. So when we're making choices or facing difficult decisions, we can use it as a barometer for how are we doing, how are we living up to our success. So let's move to the next statement. This is our next slide. This is a place where we get to think about and give you a few moments to jot down some early parts of your own brand statement. I see some others already popping into the chat window. Specialist in helping the organization interpret disparate information so it can make well-informed decisions to improve the value of the organization. Another says simply change agent. Good. Okay, so Alan.
Thank you, June. And before I move into the slide, I just wanted to comment back on those great examples that you shared. I really liked from yours the brevity of it and how easy you could memorize that and say that in an elevator. So I give you kudos for that. But in addition, as I was reading through example 2, I think this is really a great example for that LGBT professional to leverage. It is a little bit longer, but I really do think that this is a great way to communicate how, as a professional, you can, by bringing your full self to work every day, you inspire, motivate, and develop the team. So I really just wanted to highlight how example number 2 and your example can easily be adopted, whether you're an ally or an LGBT professional out in the participant forum.
Good call out, yeah.
Great, so thanks, June. Now, as we move over to the next slide, this is page number 18, we want to take you through a little bit of a reflection exercise. And think about your brand today. So we're going to be active users of the chat box here. And let's take the first bullet there around your initial impression. As you're thinking through this content, type in what pops into your head when you think about your brand today. What are some things that are just an initial impression? Oh, Michael, I really like your statement there. To be the person that my clients and coworkers come to when they need or want what's important to them. That's really great. Initial impressions I see from Donald, upbeat. From Tim, always asks tough questions. Oh, that's great. Tough, open-ended questions. Wisdom, LGBT-friendly brand. Mine is perhaps too internally focused. That's great reflection, Robin. Be my client's first call. Very good. Now, as you think about that second bullet, since we had a proactive response already from Anne around clients, think about your customers. So how do you think they describe you? Integrity. Differentiating yourself from the group and showing your value and how it adds to the group. That's really great. Dependable, great listener, helpful, accommodating, very cool. So now as you think through your brand today, you also have to be very mindful of your own team. How do you think your peers in the workplace, your reports, your managers, or other team members would respond to your current brand, to your current professional brand? Let's type in some answers in the chat box. Team player, that's great, Lindy. Positive and supportive. You know, as I think about, for those of you out there that may be responsible for a team, knowing that your team looks up to you as a positive and supportive leader, I really think that that's just such an achievement for a manager or supervisor. That's really great. Driven, open-minded, motivated, very good. Now, as you think about your brand and you continue to reflect, we got to think about our motivation. So we're going to get to, in upcoming slides, to begin developing our brand statement. We got to ensure that this is a very personal brand statement as well, or that we include that personal touch to our brand statement. So we got to think about what gets us motivated. As we think about our profession as Wells Fargo team members, in our vision and values, it talks about us getting up every day to help our customers succeed financially. So we got to think about, for you, in your career, in your profession, you got to be able to identify what your motivation is so that you can be mindful of that as you're building that brand statement. So I see some of the responses here. Deeply experienced advisor, sets the tone and vision. Very great. This is really cool, right? Let's see what else. Making a difference, being productive and effective. Effective, that's such a powerful word for a statement. Contributor, of course, collaborator. That's really awesome. Knowing the amount of work that needs to be done. That's really also great, Lindy. Thank you for that. And then, as we're thinking about our motivation, we also have to think about our talents. So earlier in the discussion, June and Astrid took us through some of the things that us as LGBT professionals or as allies, we bring to the table every day. We all have talents. Some of them may be related to our identity, some of them may not be. So we got to think about what those talents are, and as a leader, what we do with those talents to contribute to the professional workplace. And then lastly, just general competencies and passions. How do we leverage those to attain the objectives of our organization? How do we align those passions and competencies to what our organization is all about? Great comments. Knowing the amount of work that needs to be done. That awareness is key. Leading by example. Great. And the leading by example piece applies both to those individuals that have a managerial role and, of course, those as well that are individual contributors. Being human, compassionate, friendly, and helpful. That's great. Very good.
Yeah, Alan, I also saw patriotic and doing what's right.
That is right.
Yeah.
Speaking up. That is awesome. Leading by example. Very good. So as you continue your reflection, I'm going to transition now over to June, and she's going to help us with beginning to build our brand statement. June?
Yeah, so thanks, Alan. You know, as people are sharing phrases and words that are really compelling for them and beginning to frame, I'm getting really excited, actually. So I feel like something's building just in this call. So I kind of wish we could hear everybody's voices. I'll just imagine that we are. But hopefully you've been taking notes around words and phrases that describe you, what you do, and how you do that. I loved the way Astrid framed it, almost like, you know, so who are you? What do you do? Who do you do it for? And what's the impact of what you do? So when I think about the questions we have in our slide, right, what is the impact is that unique leadership value. And leadership is not just inside organizations. Leadership is at home, in our communities, with our families, as many of you have named. How do you want others to perceive you? And what is it that you wish to promise that you bring? So what's unique? What's that competitive advantage is the language we used, but what's unique? So if you were to begin to put a sentence together that said, here's what I do, and here's who I do it for, and how are they impacted? How are they transformed? Take a few moments and jot down for yourself the framework, perhaps, of your brand statement. And as you have one, feel free to type it in to the chat window. We'd like to celebrate the beginnings of these brand statements with you. There's something very powerful about putting it out into the universe to speak it.
June, as we think about this and as we've presented this in the past, and I always think about us having our own brand statement and how often that brand statement needs to be updated.
Yeah.
And not just in terms of career growth, but also just on personal growth, and how to continue to think about, how you must continue to think about what are those little touches and that polishing that you do to that brand statement that's going to make it really come alive and stay current.
Yeah. So there's a couple of folks who have written their brand statements, and we're going to celebrate them. And you're so right, Alan. We're constantly working on them, constantly tweaking, polishing. One of the things for us to think about, and we'll just share this in the moment in the summit, what we had was we asked people to stand up and literally share or read out their brand statement, and we celebrated by clapping for folks. So, we'll do the virtual version of that as we share some of these from some folks. One is Lindy is all about the ability to take the step to get something done that everyone wants to do, but no one seems to step up and make it happen. So Lindy will make that happen. Ray is a strategic thinker, creating a vision of where we're going and what it'll feel like and look like when we get there. John is a passionate business leader, sales enabler, and diversity advocate. And, by the way, is updating his LinkedIn intro right now as we speak. I love it. And we do have a question. Let me take a look at this question. Yeah, so we'll definitely flag this question and come back to it. Someone has asked whether we have ideas or what ideas we have about how to deal with varying levels of being out if being LGBT or ally is part of your brand. So we can talk a little bit about that. So we'll definitely come back to that. Actually, let me just pause before I read some of these other brand statements that are coming in. Alan or Astrid, any thoughts on what you would say in response to that question? How we would deal with varying levels of being out? Do we want to incorporate that in our brand?
Sure, I'll chime in a little bit and kind of what my thought is around that. Something that we talked about earlier in the presentation is this has to be a personal statement that you're comfortable with. And so whether you are out or not, or maybe you have certain folks in the team that know, or maybe some that are not, etc. This has to be what you're comfortable delivering and what you're comfortable talking about. That's my perception around what your statement should look like. What do others think?
Yeah, Alan, I think you said it well. I would simply say, for example, my brand statement and acknowledging that I'm an ally. So there's a different risk, if you will, coming out as an ally, as there may be for some individuals who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. But nonetheless, my brand statement doesn't speak specifically to my being an ally. Instead, what it speaks to is my willingness to champion, and then how I behave in reaction to that. So again, a level of comfort. In my case, it was more about brevity, but I really want to honor, Alan, what you said about being clear where our waterline is on our iceberg, and giving ourselves perhaps a little bit of grace even.
Yeah, I also like what John just mentioned here. You could promote a subtle message, not necessarily LGBT. It's true. It could be inclusive,
Yeah.
which could mean everything.
Yeah. I like it. Thanks for calling that out, Astrid. So a few more brand statements, and then we'll go on, but I'd love to continue to celebrate. So Michael, to be an effective and pleasant resource for my clients and coworkers by providing strong communication and dependable service for the purpose of helping them achieve their goals. Another strong brand statement. Marisha, a human, compassionate, energetic, friendly, and helpful person in every sphere to help make the world a better place. Lovely. I'm getting a sense, I feel like I'm beginning to get to know some of you. I'm loving it. Jean, I'm a creative thinker, assertive problem solver who creates compelling revenue growth opportunities for my firm. Nice.
I like the question Emily's posing. How can we as allies support our LGBT colleagues make being out as part of their brand statement a reality? How would you handle that, June?
Yeah. You know, I would suspect all of us have a lens on that. I think one of the things that's just so important as an ally, first of all, to educate ourselves. So participating in conversation, certainly Out and Equal's got fabulous resources, but really educating ourselves on some of the dynamics in the workplace. As allies, we often know what are the dynamics around sexual orientation, gender identity at work. And sometimes it's just we're the ones who might first say, well, instead of saying spouses, could we, for this recognition event, encourage people to bring somebody who's important to them? I love also somebody just weighed in. Don't be a closet ally, right? We need to know that there are others out here. So I think that's a great example. Alan, I see what you typed into the chat window. Absolutely join your ERG or BRG. Be a visible member. Talk about learning. And, I think the other is, to the extent that we have relationships with LGBT colleagues, we can ask, what could we do more of, or what could we stop doing to help create more inclusion? So we just ask and be willing to admit we don't have the answer. What other suggestions do others have? You can either type them into the chat windows or to my colleagues. What would you add to what I've said?
I feel that you've gone through most of the things that we need to take into account, not only as an LGBT member, but certainly as an ally, and being able to make a difference. You said it yourself, we need to ask. And when people get asked a question, they feel very comfortable. They kind of sense where you're coming from. And in that fashion, we can include that into our branding statement. I also agree with Alan that who knows, we might have 2-3 different brand statements depending upon the audience that we have. Remember what I mentioned before. Basically, your audience is important, who you do it for, and it all depends the level of comfort of each one of the people on this webcast at this point in time.
Ray brings up the concept of authenticity, and this is something that personally has been a challenge I learned about the concept of authenticity, I would say, just within the last couple of years, and I've always challenged myself more and more to become authentic and come across authentically, because just naturally, you can tend to build walls, et cetera, as you're presenting in a professional environment, et cetera. And just telling a story, your true story, really helps with that authenticity piece. So I really like that you brought that up, Ray, and I just think that having that awareness and working with your allies around that authenticity piece is really just great.
Pat, I think you're right. Creating an inclusive worded brand opens the door to discussions, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Just being inclusive, it means everything.
Yeah. If there's a brand in the window, Tim, I'm appreciating what you're sharing, that your brand is to be bold, be visible, to drive change, to confront. But at your firm, that is not a lit alignment, right? So the firm's got a different approach, kind of lay low, don't go there, don't draw attention. Not having a brand or putting it forward is the best way to go. So sometimes when there is a disconnect between our brand and the environments in which we're operating, we've got choices to make. If part of our brand is to help drive change and be courageous, sometimes it is being bold and visible. And then sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where we just make choices, frankly, not to be in that environment. So it kind of raises a really great conversation. Okay, what else? So we're moving into some other questions. I think, let's see, who am I queuing up next, actually? We've been sharing. Just realized I've done a terrible job advancing the slides.
So I think that we've done so much sharing already in this section, June, that perhaps we can begin the conversation around these other important bullets that we should consider as we're building our brand.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, and certainly jump in here with me, my friends and colleagues here. So we've got a couple of questions that we've queued up, but there's also some others that are coming in through chat, which is great. So once your brand is out there, so this one's coming in from the group, once your brand is out there, how do we make the next step into that authenticity? I'll just kind of open that up. And we've talked a little bit about that. I think sometimes it really is asking about having a partner, right? Asking for somebody to help us kind of have our backs. That could be a part of it. Test the waters, get some feedback on our brand.
Ray, I also agree with you when you say that what may have worked for you early in your career not necessarily will be working as you progressed in leadership. But certainly, I think precisely that's the reason why we need to review our brand statement every so often. And I'm sure that if we look back, we can say, well, that certainly that brand statement that I had at that point in time certainly applied a few years back. And certainly you need to make sure that you review it every so often and just make sure that you're keeping up with times as well.
Yeah. So how do you use your brand? We've got a couple of answers popping into the windows, which is great. And that is, oops. I'm literally, some of these answers are flying in, so bear with me here. Using it by sharing it freely. Right? Socially commit your brand by sharing it. Absolutely. Try it on your manager. Try it on some coworkers. I also, and someone else shared here, John did, add it to my LinkedIn email signature. And I've done the same thing, actually. If you pulled up my LinkedIn profile, my brand statement is a big part of my summary statement right at the top. It ties also to the question, how do you apply it on social media?
So Jean is posing a question. What if there is a disconnect between what you want your brand to be and how you are perceived?
That's a great question. Yeah, that came up in the summit as well, and or after the summit, I think actually someone said, "Oh, I wish I had asked that question." So I'm thrilled that it was asked today. You know, one of the things is I think as we go through life, we often find out that what we intend doesn't always match up to what the actual impact was. And so the first step really is to know that there is a disconnect. One powerful way, I'll toss it out here, to think about is, you know, before even testing your brand statement, pick a group of folks. You ask your manager, ask some of your colleagues, ask some of your family, ask for friends. Jean and Alan is saying this, right? Get feedback from those around you. Ask them to literally give you 3 words that they would use to describe you, and have that help inform where you're starting from. The other is, if the way that you're trying to to brand yourself is somewhat disconnected from the words and the experiences that you're getting from others, you can enlist those same people to say, one of the things that I'm hearing from you is I'm known for this, this, and this. I really want to be known for that. And so would you give me feedback when I'm doing that well? You know, mentors can help you connect. I love that, Michael. And it really is an amazing process to get feedback from others. But if there is a disconnect, it's making a commitment, and sometimes it's a verbal commitment to those around you who are important to you, to say, I understand I show up as someone who does a lot of talking. I want to do that, but I also want to be known as a great listener. So I'm going to be practicing that. I'm going to put that out here. Help me with that, and ask for support in that particular place. So that would be kind of my basic suggestion. And that's a repeat, rinse, right? What do they say, lather, rinse, repeat with shampoo? That's where I would go with that.
And you know, June, to Jean's question too, so I feel like I went a little bit through that when I first shared my brand statement with those that I knew would provide me that candid feedback. And the first thing that came across from somebody was, you know, this doesn't sound like you. This sounds too formal. And that really resonated with me, and I went back and found myself having to rewrite it and having to adjust some words that sounded more like something I would say, versus trying to commit to all of, you know, having a rigid process or leveraging words that I wouldn't normally use in day-to-day conversations. So really going back and hearing that candid feedback and teeing it up with that person that you're having that conversation with, saying, hey, I really need you to be honest and candid with me. This is really important, and it's going to impact me professionally. How does this sound? And share your brand statement and let them be totally honest so that you can go back, refresh it, and come back with something that's going to be more reflective of you.
Yeah, I think the another reminder that I would put out there is simply that it takes a while to build a brand. It takes a while to refine one. So paying attention to it over time will make a big difference. And so, you know, both enabling your brand to build and being open to the reality that it may need to change over time.
What Donald is saying is just right. It just takes a minute to lose your brand, right? If that reputation is so difficult to build but so easy, it can be challenged.
Yep. Okay, so how are we doing? Okay, so other thoughts on this, right? It is a journey, so you should anticipate building your brand over time. revisiting it, revising it. I literally like to keep it written on a Post-it note on the monitors that I use a lot, my home office, my work office, and I can glance at it and, one, ask myself if I'm living up to that, and two, is it still meaningful, or is there something missing from it? The idea of the test drive we've kind of talked about a bit. Read your leadership brand to at least 3 people around you. Do it this week and get some feedback. And think about that in a broad sphere and be willing to check it regularly, every couple of months. Seek some more feedback. And you can either do that by sharing your brand and have people reacting, or ask them what they perceive your brand to be, either way. And then really think about how you might use your brand statement, signature lines, on LinkedIn or in Facebook, Yammer. If you've got a website, thinking about that. Sometimes we have personal business cards or even companies where we're able to put a small brand statement if there's flexibility in your organizations to do that. Really think about creative ways where you might use your brand. And it really is important to pay attention to how broadly are you using it. A really powerful brand statement works inside your company as well as in the community as well as home. It really gets to the essence of who you are, what you're all about.
And as you begin developing that brand statement and you have something that you're comfortable with, challenge yourself to go back through things like your social media and seeing if that social media presence is aligned with your brand statement. Going back to emails that you write in your office with your colleagues, etc., and going back and really seeing, hey, do my emails sound like this brand that I'm building for myself? Your voicemail messages, what you sound like in a conference call. All of those things are things that should align to your brand presence because they will support that brand message that you're trying to bring across.
It looks like we have another question that's come up through the chat. I'm wondering, maybe Astrid, if you'd be willing to take a stab at this one. As you decide to change careers or retire or maybe make a major shift, what suggestions might you have on how to work on a brand regarding something you've never done before?
Yeah, I guess June, I will revisit the questions that we posed before. First, hopefully it will be something that you are familiar with, obviously what it is that you are going to be doing, and once again, who is your audience going to be? All we have to do is just revisit once again those 4 items. And certainly it will make a big difference if, as Alan mentioned before, if you can share that with your colleagues, with your friends, or people around you, people that care about you, that can openly tell you, just like that person told Alan, that doesn't look like you, doesn't sound like you, doesn't even smell like you, because certainly it makes a big difference. Sometimes we need to hear from other people, and you just need to, once again, revisit exactly what it is that you want to convey in your message.
That's great. June, Astrid, what do you think if we now open it up to any questions that the audience may have? So, audience, what questions do you have?
And Alan, this is Pat. It's an amazing amount of information. I love the interaction that's been going on with everybody. I can see that. I just hear the pens and the pencils writing quickly at the desk to do this. What's your sense about, I know branding is kind of, the buzz here in the United States. What about in other countries? Would you make some differences if you were heading off to someplace like the UK or somewhere like Asia? Differences you would think about?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Alan, I'm sorry, were you going to respond?
I was first going to say that's an excellent question too, June. And I thought, Astrid, I know with the work that you do, you travel quite often outside of the United States and you do business outside of the United States. What can you share with us?
Yeah, it's It's funny you're asking that question because precisely that's the reason why I mentioned before. Um, People might have 2 or 3 different brand statements depending upon the audience, and that is basically my case. When I travel to some countries that are not as accepting, I certainly, I will say, I'm a bit prudent in that respect. And obviously, the kind of clients or the kind of people that I deal with are extremely open-minded. But at the same time, the culture of a country, it might be a little bit different. So yeah, I just need to be aware of my surroundings. I need to be aware of the people that I'm dealing with. That doesn't mean that they are not respectful of who I am. Absolutely they are, in my specific case. They just don't feel like talking about my branding in that sense, and I totally respect it. But at the same time, when I have the opportunity, I make sure people hear what my branding is, especially when it comes down to the LGBT community. And believe me, it has made a big difference in my career.
Great question. Great answer, Astrid. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sri. That's great. And, you know, it's been interesting. I've met some folks, you know, you do some of the social mix like that, you know, and business mixers, and a lot of times all you get is the brand. And, you know, you talk to them, and every other sentence is the brand statement with all that. And I think that there's a piece that, and I think that's what you've been driving at all along, is that, you know, you got to go deeper than that. It's got to be who you are so you can carry on a conversation. But when you first start out, you know, you get this great thing, and the guidance is this is when. Are there times that are better to use it, or is it just that first intro, or it sounds like you're trying to say integrate it into all of things you do without being so obvious. A sentence every 5 minutes.
Yeah, this is June. One of the things that I would share is I use my brand statement a lot, but I also almost think about it as a person, like a life purpose statement. So if somebody asks me what I do, and you kind of see my title, you know, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy Consultant, or my title's really Organization Effectiveness and Development Senior Consultant. You know, it's this long title. I would really prefer to answer and do that. What I do is I champion individuals, teams, and organizations to greater success. And they said, well, tell me more about that. And then I can talk about the work of being a coach and the work of being an ally and an advocate. And I can choose how I describe it, but it opens a different conversation. So for me, my brand is not about selling my products or services, for example, but it really is about who is June Carter. So I actually find one of my favorite places to use it is out in the community or at social gatherings as much as in a workplace. So it's also be aware of how you want to use your brand and what venues you might. And if it is very product focused, yeah, there's probably certain spaces you might not use it. I don't know, Alan or Astrid, what might you add to what I've shared?
And I totally agree with that. The brand statement could be extremely product focused, which is fine, or it could be more towards who you are and what you do. Branding is something very personal. I don't think there is a cookie cutter way of saying it should be done as A, B, C, and the result should be D. Absolutely not. I think, as I mentioned before, it should identify who we are. We should be able to read that brand statement and say, oh yeah, that's June, certainly. Or this is the person that is writing the statement. Or, well, obviously he or she copied and pasted the brand statement from somewhere else. That's not what we want to do. So it all depends. It all depends on where we are and what exactly we're trying to do. There is no wrong answer to that.
Great, and that almost sounds like we're kind of moving into kind of closing comments on that. I don't see any more questions that have come in right now, but so again, kind of maybe in 3 stages. You're just getting started, you have a brand statement, but you're not happy with it, or you think you've got it really great. What's the next level? Maybe we could talk with some closing comments about where that goes. June, you want to
Yeah.
start? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I would simply say, whether you're just starting out or you're looking to evolve it, I like to start with the feedback. So it really is a matter of periodically, I just ask, 5 to 7 people, would you share with me 3 words that you would use to describe me? Or if you were to introduce me to someone else, what would you say? And people are really willing to share that, and it is hugely helpful. So I do it regularly. I've made it part of my standard practice. So I would just try that.
Sounds like a great icebreaker for a meeting.
It can work for that too, yes. Nice catch, absolutely. Great, makes for a great ERG event as well. Speed networking and to do that.
Excellent. Alan, any last thoughts?
I think it's that, like June said, the feedback is just the key, and keeping that authenticity alive. Identify the most honest people you know and share that with them. My mother is very honest. I shared it with her. My boss, I'm blessed to have her, and she's quickly to give me feedback. I also shared it with her, and they both gave me some great pointers that I was then able to turn around and implement to not only how I worded my brand statement, but also the way I delivered it. So those are just some general things.
Excellent. And Astrid, any last thoughts?
No, I think I feel we cover everything on branding. Again, remember, there is no wrong statement. It's very personal.
Great. And all 3 of you have done an amazing job, and I want to thank you for all the expertise and putting this together, and we can see now why it was one of our highest rated workshops. I'm surprised that you got through all the material. We had a little bit with all the chat going on, quite a bit of input, but I'm sure in a classroom situation this would really have kept. So we want to make sure that everyone, when you end the call, take our short survey and let us know what you think and rate the centers and the content and give us other ideas. We'll be back Tuesday, March 10th for our 5th virtual summit on the Clorox Journey, LGBT Marketing and Innovation. Of course, if you can make a donation to Out and Equal, we'd appreciate that to continue these programs. And we hope that you will all be able to join us in 2015 at the Out and Equal Workplace Summit in Dallas, October 5th to 8th. So start making those plans or having those discussions within your ERG, BRG. And with that, we will see you in a couple of weeks. And thanks so much for all of your work and all of the inputs that